Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Rolling Stories, the podcast that delves deep into the captivating world of human resources. I'm your host, Adrian Tan, and today I'm excited to welcome another remarkable guest to the show, Mr. Sanjiv Agrawal. Sanjiv's story is a riveting one, spanning from mixology to people management, and I'm very certain we'll be able to hear more about that later on. And as a head of HR, Sanjeev has seen his fair share of challenges, notably when he stepped into a company filled with dissatisfied employees. Story number two. And he actually went on to take such an inventive idea that took shape in the middle of a global pandemic. He actually started a radio show. Now, that's story number three for all of us. I'm very certain every one of us right now is very stoked up and excited. And our discussion would also pan across his fascinating recruitment strategies. And also, of course, in the midst of all these successes, there must be some setbacks and unforeseen challenges. We'll also learn about how Sanjeev faced those obstacles and the valuable lessons that he picked up along the way that he could share with us. So stay tuned for this roller coaster ride of real life stories, novel ideas, and profound wisdom. And with that, Sanjeev, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for having me on your show.
So Sanjeev, let's start with the bartendering part. So you transitioned from a bartender to a career in HR. That is some very unique pivot. Tell us, how did that actually come about?
Yeah, that it was a long time ago, and wasn't something I planned. To be fair, it happened as more of an accident than anything else. I started my career in hotels, as you alluded, and my first job was mixing drinks behind a bar counter. Probably the best job I've done. But over the years, I did different roles in hotels. I was for a few years and ended up being a trainer. And some big corporate was looking for trainers with customer service background, and hence I got that job. And one thing led to another. As I was going through my career in the new organization, eventually one day the CEO calls me and says, "Why don't you take over HR from Monday?" And that's how I got into HR. It wasn't something I was planning to do. It wasn't something I had anticipated I'll end up doing, but I ended up there. So as much as I'd like to take credit for getting into HR, I never wanted it this way.
Given my conversations with many HR leaders, I recall from the CHRO of Singtel to a senior HR VP at Great Eastern, every one of them actually has the same story, which is they fell into HR. It was always an accident. Which I think during this early, I guess to some extent, you can also look at it that accident is actually a good thing because it led you to somewhere. And of course, that led you through this roller coaster of a lot more stories I can share with us. But before I dive into it, I'm still very interested, given that you have bartending experiences. Any of your personal preferred mixes right now, or anything that you would definitely not order because of your experience and know-how as a bartender?
Well, it was a long time ago, but I'm more of a straight drinks guy. I don't like personally. I don't like too many mixes and too many colorful drinks. To be honest, that's probably part of the occupation I was in.
I see. You must have taken a toll on you when you have customers asking for very fanciful drink and you're like, why don't you just take it straight?
Yeah, kind of.
So let's move on to your career as in HR. And you did mention about this part where you enter a job and then there were so many unhappy people when you first joined. Could you give us a bit of pre-story or back cursor on that? What actually, when did you join? What kind of industry was there? And why were they unhappy to begin with?
So I don't think it's very unique. A lot of people I interact with, employees, friends, colleagues, uh, generally people do not feel satisfied with the HR support they get, and it's a very common phenomenon, not unique. When I first got into HR, I myself, at a point in time, felt dissatisfied with HR of my organization as an employee, and that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't want to get into HR, because that wasn't something I was aspiring to do. However, as I got into it, I actually thought, let me first understand why people really reach out to HR. So what I did, my first thing that I got into HR and I did was, you know, in HR there are quite a few phones that keep ringing. Usually in any HR department, people are calling for
Mm.
different types of asks. And those days we didn't have those self-service platforms where you can raise a ticket, etc. So I actually got all the phones together and I sat next to the phones and I said, anybody calling HR, I'll be the one who will pick up the phone. And within a week, I started to realize that actually people have very simple asks and we can actually serve them much faster, much easier if we organize ourselves better. So that's how I
Hmm.
started the journey. At the time, I didn't know this, but that was my first entry into user experience, employee experience kind of a frame, and it happened organically. Largely, people, even today, if you come across people who and you ask them about what kind of HR support they get, they feel dissatisfied with the kind of procedural hurdles they have to deal with when dealing with HR. They feel HR is not empathetic enough, and that's usually a very common feedback you can see about how people perceive their HR function.
Why do you think that seems to be more of a default? Because if we, well, at least as a third party, when you look from an outside in lens, it does seem ironic to perform in that manner. And as you mentioned, when you start taking in all the calls, actually the requests are very simple. Why would people not be taking those phone calls to begin with? What is the impression behind it? Or is it just a matter of the wrong people in the kind of job that has to deliver this kind of HR support?
So I think there are quite a few factors involved in this, right? Firstly, I'll say um, anybody who's calling HR has an emotional, sensitive topic to deal with. To start with, it could be dissatisfaction with my salary, or I'm upset about some benefit, or I have a challenge in my relationship with my line manager, something like that, right? Nobody
It's never
calls
good
HR to
things, right? Nobody will call
no,
HR and say, "Well done, good job."
yeah, right. No, nobody calls HR to say thank you. I got my salary on time, right? So I think we are starting from a place of some kind of a back foot, if I can articulate it that way. And then, if you take it from the other side of the desk, the person in HR is getting so many calls of such emotion on a daily basis, and usually HR departments are understaffed, in my experience. Not everywhere, but generalizing it. So they are themselves running after a lot of targets to meet, tasks to complete, and everything is urgent. Everything has an employee at the end of it, and they're trying to do their best. But it's not always that we have the best infrastructure. Even technology wise, HR tech is still an emerging field. You don't see the same evolution of tech in HR space as you see in, let's say, uh, consumer behavior space or marketing space and things like that. So I think it's a combination of various factors. I would also say that capability in HR sometimes comes in the way, right? But I don't think there's just one single switch to kind of press and correct this. There are quite a few factors at play. HR needs more investment, better quality of education, experience, better infrastructure of technology, and also better understanding from its employees as to what is it that you can get from HR.
Hmm.
So I think it's a journey, and I do believe that it has changed over the years. It's evolving, and HR is not always seen as the police person or the people who don't understand or taking sides and things like that. But it's still a journey.
And I do admire the fact that you step in to take up those support calls. It really does send a very strong signal to people that you are looking to change things. And that might in itself change the perspective as well to how people look at HR overall.
To be honest, it did help setting a different context. Although it wasn't my intelligence that I was driving that. For me, it was a very selfish reason. I wanted to understand why people call HR and how do we deal with those things. Because I was coming from a non-HR background,
Mm,
so I was scared when I got into this role. And for me, it was more about my learning because every time there was a question coming from an employee, I would go back to somebody in my team and say, hey, so what do we do with this? They say,
mm,
yeah, we do it this way. So why do we do it this way? Because the employee is not looking for this answer. And we'll have a good debate. And that helped me gain my experience of what is HR all about? Why are we doing things like this? And gave me an opportunity to challenge.
And I think
But
challenge seems to be very much in your blood, as we have, as I've learned during our previous conversation. You did something extremely unique, extremely out of the box. If there was even a box that could contain this idea, when you were with HSBC and you guys were struggling to hire people in the procurement department, right?
no, so this was, let me give you the backstory of this. I was working in Sri Lanka. We were setting up a new center there, and I was responsible for a team of project managers who were largely going to project manage programs, for want of. And the focus was to who can getting a mandate, break down the whole mandate into specifics, and then follow through those timelines to make sure that everything happens at the right time, um, and kind of raise red flags or escalate if there is a risk of one of those milestones not getting met. And this involved, making sure logistics are in place, systems are in place, people are in place, all sorts. So it's quite a complex role. And because the market in Sri Lanka did not have such people at the time, we tried recruiting from different industries with people who had project management titles, and we didn't really find the right mix of skills and experiences that would fit our requirements. And somehow by accident, I came across somebody who was working in a garment manufacturing company. And Sri Lanka has a big industry, at least those days it used to have a big garment manufacturing. And I came across somebody who was into this line of business. Their role was merchandising, and their focus was as soon as there was an order that landed on the table, they were responsible for making sure that the order, the raw material is procured on time, it's shipped on time, it goes into the factory, the lines are secured, the stitching happens, dyeing happens, quality control happens, and the product is packed, shipped to the customer on time. And I said, wow, this is exactly the fit I'm looking for, just completely, different places. So then I ended up interviewing people very specifically from the garment industry who were doing such roles. And they became very successful in our sector. In the process, I learned a lot about how to manufacture garments, and very specifically, I remember, I still probably recall there were something like about 17 or 18 stitches that takes into making a bra, and I could actually interview people on some of these technical aspects to understand if they really know their job. So
So
that
on
was
one
quite
hand, you
interesting.
managed to solve a resourcing problem. On the other hand, you also became a bra expert as well.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but it was a good learning experience, and also gave me a real life experience of how you can use skills in a transferable manner. We talk a lot about transferable skills, but this was a real life example for me that brought it to life.
Hmm. Having done recruitment before, I could really tell and resonate with the transferable skills part. But I also find challenge in trying to convince the hiring manager about the emphasis on transferable skills rather than someone who is the exact same job title in your closest competition. I'm very certain within your organization there might be some pushback. Is there any, and how did you work around?
So interestingly, at the time, I was the hiring manager. So I wasn't in HR. And therefore, it was easy for me to make that decision. But yeah, I fully agree with you that sometimes hiring managers don't want to risk taking a bold move like this. There is, of course, a risk, right? When I was making this decision, I also evaluated the risk that I was taking. But I felt confident because I knew the job myself. I had done the
Hmm.
role myself before I got promoted to lead the team, and I felt okay. Uh, this is the kind of skill I'm looking for. If I get the right people, I can work with them and transfer them to the environment that we need them to work on. But their discipline around the time management, looking at milestones, and kind of plotting back the steps,
Hmm.
is something that they bring with them. It's just different jargon to use, really. But I agree with you that if I was not the line manager or hiring manager for this role, this would have been a bit more of a difficult.
And of course, on the back of that, as you progress, you continue to take on or came up with new initiative, which really help
So I
to
must I
solve.
must interrupt you on this one. The pushback I got was from the hiring team. They say, "Are you serious? You really want us to go and look for these people? But they are not from our industry." So actually, there was a bit of a reverse pushback because my hiring team was like, "Are you really serious? Have you lost it?"
But you're able to show them, of course,
Yeah,
that all this, and I think it helps that you have actually done those jobs before, so you know exactly what is required and how to dissect and isolate the right skill sets. Because I think many times there are certain things that people can learn, right? You know, there's always this saying, you hire for attitude, you can always teach skills and all that. So, but of course, with you having the ability to break down the requirement into different blocks, it's very easy to identify where else or who else may have those blocks and chain everything together. Logistics ultimately is logistics, right?
correct.
Whether you are trying to ship a can of Coke or a
Yeah,
computer or
yeah.
chemical, it's all the same. It's all about trying to go through that steps in a very sequential manner and in a very just in time manner, because nobody want to hold inventory.
Yeah, so this was so interesting. This has nothing to do with manufacturing at all. This was more about people coming in, training new people, setting up processes. So completely different context. But like you said, the discipline around managing the time and milestones was the key. Because you can say, yeah, okay, I'll get it done tomorrow. Today is not done, and before you realize that milestone next week is not going to be met because there are three things that are still pending. And that is something we could not afford in that job, because people were coming from different places. The computer has to be on the table when somebody arrives. uh, and computer Getting the computer on the table takes 3 weeks. The person is already scheduled to arrive. Their training material has to be on at the same time. Their accesses have to be on at the same time. The trainer has to. So they were like really a complex set of things to bring together,
Mm.
to for everything to fall on the same place at the same time on the right date. So it was quite interesting, and thankfully I stumbled upon that merchandising role. It would have been a struggle.
And I'd like to move into something that you most recently, and we imagine it should probably be your most recent initiative, which happened during the pandemic when you were struggling with the face to face interaction within your company. And you started something that I have never heard anyone started. I'll let you share more on that. But my question is, how did that idea come about? And importantly, what impact do you see subsequently?
Everybody went into pandemic at the same time, and like every organization, there was a lot of ask from business people. We're stressed out. We don't know how to cope with this sudden change, right? People were stuck at home. They could not come out. Workload was not changing enough, and people were really in a very different set of circumstances. So, like everybody else, we started putting together some sessions online, Zoom, Teams, etc. Went to the same kind of facilitators whom we had used in past, and I think everybody I spoke to were doing the same things. But quickly I realized not every facilitator was effective on a Zoom or a Teams call, because it is restrictive, right? You have to be um, kind of differently tuned to make the most of a medium which is only through a screen. Half the time people do not switch on their cameras. You cannot break them into breakouts so easily. I mean, of course, Zoom and Teams have evolved and now you have much more features in those platforms. But at the start of pandemic, it was still kind of coping up with the demand it had. So I sat down and said, look, this is going to be a hit and a miss every time we try to do this. So this is not really solving the ask. People want to de-stress. They want to get together. They are stuck at their homes. How do we de-stress people? So then I sat down and just very similar to what I did during this experience of the merchandisers. I actually broke it down to what am I looking for and where does that exist. So I realized I'm looking for somebody to engage people on a spoken medium, because largely if you think about a Zoom call or a Teams call, if people switch off their cameras, which at the time I can understand, everybody wasn't comfortable switching on the cameras, letting people into their homes. We need to really leverage the spoken medium and engage people. So, okay, so where do I find such skills where people are really good with their spoken word and they can effectively engage people, wide range of people? And you quickly realize radio is the medium. So, okay, what if we actually brought that radio environment into our office? And of course, I couldn't think of setting up a radio setup in the office. That's not who we are, financial services organization. It's okay. So let's break this down further, and eventually came to a proposal that said, okay, let's do a show where we don't talk about mission, vision, values, and stuff like that. We just play some music, talk about stuff, food, what we miss, how do we shop online, day to day stuff, right? And just get together, a place to hang out, for want of a better word. And that's how the idea kind of took shape. Uh, of course, not something that everybody bought into day one, uh, but eventually it kind of got very good reviews, and we, after the first show, we got like a huge amount of positive feedback. We started in 2020, and actually we still run the show even after pandemic is over because people want it. So we are right now in the sixth season of that.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So the
I
whole
also
purpose
didn't
is
think it would take
to,
off so well.
so it's really to replicate that pantry environment, right? I would imagine, just to get people to keep up to date on what's going on, and I think to continue have that dotted line or that connection back to office, which we often will overlook. I personally work from home, so I can completely understand that. I'm completely detached from the world. The office building can burn down and I won't even know a thing. But with with something there to keep you reminded, to also keep you understanding what is going on, and maybe to even keep a tab on what is going on in the lives of other colleagues. That definitely is something I personally think I would tune into.
Yeah, yeah. And it was very specifically aimed at not trying to bring in the corporate side of things. So it was more like you said, pantry conversation. Hey, what did you shop last week? What did you do last weekend? We cover topics like anything. We did. I'm just thinking about weird topics: online shopping, online dating, weird foods you have. A rock theme show and techno theme show, all sorts.
And in all this attempt to push the envelope, I think what the listeners may have formed an impression is you are moving from milestone to milestone. But I think it's also fair to say that when you try to put in a lot of experiments, some experiments will fail. And I think it's
Yeah.
also fair for us to paint across that picture. Some work, some doesn't work. Are you able to share of a few or maybe just one most memorable one that you tried, you think it was done in the best intention, but somehow it just didn't work out?
Oh, there are. I can vouch for it. In fact, I would even say that only some work.
Most, but we didn't touch on them.
So maybe I just take a step back on failures, right? I think failures are important to have as well. And if anybody were to think of only selecting the successes, whatever you define success as, I was recruiting in this merchandising in Sri Lanka. Not everybody worked out, but large proportion worked out. I still had to tweak, and I still had to go on with my refinement experience of it. It didn't work out in the first instance as well. When I started doing it, it took time for me to understand what I was looking for. Similarly, with this radio thing, I first went to somebody and said, "What do you think of it?" They said, "Get out." I went to a radio jockey and said, "Would you like to do a show?" He says, "Why? What do you want me to do in this show? Am I supposed to just tell people how good the organization is, the organization?" So then why do you need a radio show? Right. So even what we think of success is not really an overnight success. Eventually it comes about to be a success. And most of the times it's not just because of what I did, it's because of so many other factors that it became successful. Right. So for me, the way I look at it is there is no such thing as a pure play success I have achieved or a pure play failure I have encountered. I have tried my best, and some things worked out and some things didn't. But I learned from everything, and I would keep on doing those things as long as I can. So you're right, failures are important, but equally we should not let the failures come in the way. Right? If I stopped after my failures, I would never have achieved anything.
But in doing so, are there some tips or some framework that you align with? Because we also would not want to jump into every new shiny object in thinking that you solve our problems. Are there some guidelines that you abide to, or some ways to try to minimize the downside?
So difficult for me to put a finger on a particular formula. I wish I had something that I could say it always works. Uh, I think the piece that I really focus on and I depend on is perseverance. Uh, there is no downside big enough till I give up. So yeah, I get disappointed. a number of times, almost every day. But my belief is that it's not forever. That disappointment is transitional. Uh, if I get the right circumstances, I'm able to pitch myself in the right way, I will be able to get through that hurdle. So everything is transitionary and nothing is forever, is what kind of keeps me going.
And there's one thing that you mentioned, which I really like, and this phase is it is a no now, not a no forever.
Oh,
Could
absolutely.
you explain the meaning behind this? Although it's quite a self-explanatory statement, but importantly, how it influenced your approach to decision making, and importantly, leadership.
Yeah. So whenever I hear a no, I don't think of it as a no. I think of it as no for this particular instance. So what can I change in this instance that will change this no? So any no, anytime we get a decision which is unfavorable, or what you call it, is basically a sum total of the experience we have put forward. Is it my pitch? Does my pitch need changing? Is it my approach that is different? Is the timing right? There are so many different factors. Is the person in the right frame of mind? Did I catch them at the wrong time? Do I need to tweak my approach? Do I need to go to a different person? So a no is not a permanent no. I mean, like I said, this is all transitional. So as much as it sounds preachy, it actually works very beautifully in real.
Yeah, and I think that would really help people to frame all the rejections, all the pushback that they've been getting across in their corporate life. If they remember that a no is just a no now, not a no forever, you just have to try again when the time is better or when the stars are aligned. I mean, even for yourself, when you move from different roles or different things, you have to wait for the stars to align as well before that accident will come into play. So I
Absolutely.
think it would happen for everyone. So with that, and I think we come to the end of the show. But before I let you go, looking back on your entire journey, what would be one key advice you would give to the 25-year-old Sanjiv?
I think if I look
Firstly,
back
will he
now,
even listen to the
probably
to
not.
the conversation?
But if I could live it again, I would probably live it the same way. The only thing I'd probably tell my younger self is it's a long way. Don't take everything so seriously. Sometimes we let success gets to our head too much, or disappointments bring us down too much, and I think nothing lasts as long as that. You move on from one to another. We speak about so many successes because we focus a lot on successes, but actually, if I start counting my failures, it will fill pages in a book.
You can write a book about it. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And before I let you go, for people who is keen to learn more about yourself or even to maybe reach out to you, where can they go to?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Just look for me. I'm around. I'm happy to have a chat with any of those young people who want to explore HR, or just be adventurous with their careers. Very happy to talk to people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, listeners, you hear that firsthand. If you wish to speak with the Indiana Jones of HR world, you know where to look and who to look out for. I hope this has been very enriching and very informative and knowledgeable for you. I'm very certain it did for me in learning how to push the envelope, how to push it well, and how to do it in a timely fashion. And most importantly, if you're getting rejected today, remember it's not a forever rejection, just have to time it well and try again because it's a no now, but not a no forever. With that, thank you so much, Sanjay, for coming onto the show.
Thank you, Adrian.